to cases. So first, I want to say more about virtue. I want to say more about virtue so that we can make sense of the claims on how to use it for moral deliberation. First is that virtue is who we make ourselves to be. So in many philosophical texts, virtue is used interchangeably with character, so that virtue cultivation is taken to be synonymous with character building. So character building is trying to become a certain sort of person. So when we talk about virtue, we're not just talking about a good person. We're talking about specific qualities of that person and who she really is, who they really are, what kind of person they become. So how we cultivate character depends on the kind of person we choose to be. So nobody becomes virtuous automatically. Virtue is a characteristic of the person that depends on her choices. We're not talking about an impulse to be generous. Some kids actually have the impulse to be generous. It's easy for them to share candy if they have it. Other kids don't have such an impulse. Their impulse is to cling to what they have and not share, right? So the naturally occurring kind of natural tendencies that we see in people, especially in the very young people, children, that's not virtue. Virtue is something that we see as part of a person's identity as she grows older and remains there as part of her character through old age. So on this slide, I have a picture of two men, cyclists, who competed in the Tour of Luzon. It's an old picture. It's actually from 2013. And the person in the green jersey is the leader during this stage of the race. And the Tour of Luzon is a quite complex and difficult thing to compete in, right? So it involves, I'll read one description of the tour. The tour opens with a 175.5 kilometer stage from Bangi to Apari in Cagayan, followed by a long 196 kilometer second stage that ends in Kawayan, Isabela. Stage 3 is easy because it's only 104 kilometer cruising through Bayombong, Nueva Vizcaya. I think this is mostly plains. And then the fourth and final stage requires riders to travel 133.5 kilometer over the Cordilleras and finishing in Baguio City. So if we talk about an ability or a skill to ride a bike, to be a cyclist, even if you are a weekend cyclist, even if some of you are, none of us probably are like these two men. Why? Because being a cyclist is part of who they are. It's part of their character, their decisions about what they're going to do every day, how they're going to spend their weekends, what they're going to eat, what time they're going to sleep, and all manner of practical decisions about their lives are connected to being a cyclist because they're professional cyclists. Now, I'm giving that example to give you an idea on what virtue is about. So if a person is brave or generous or just, that determines what the person chooses on a daily basis and in a sustained manner. So virtue is a specialized ability or it's a lot like a skill. So that's why I give the example of cycling. And it's not like I know how to ride the bike, right? Knowing how to ride the bike is not the same thing as being a skilled cyclist. So virtue as excellence is a lot like being a skilled cyclist. It is a specialized ability. It requires extended time and energy in its cultivation. So that's why people say, virtue is a deep quality of the person. So it's part of personal identity. That's what's meant by deep. It's not an accidental feature. It's not a feature that's there temporarily. And it's also a quality of the person that is ultimately grounded in choice, maybe a big choice in the beginning. I want to be this sort of person. And then a sustained series of choices and small things almost on a daily basis. Now, virtue is rooted in the function or nature of something. The Greek word for virtue, arete, literally means excellence. So virtue is a form of human excellence. More specifically, it's a form of excellence in the moral domain. Now, we can talk about excellent things and excellent human beings. We can talk about excellent cyclists, excellent singers, excellent writers, and so on. Now, the Aristotelian idea is this. The excellence of something is based on what it is. There is a certain logic to excellence, which is that being excellent means performing the function well. So we can use that idea for inanimate objects like knives. You cannot say, this knife is excellent, it's a cheese knife, but it cannot cut cheese, right? That just flies in the face of reason. You cannot also say, this operating system, this OS is excellent because it's always crashing, right? That just flies in the face of reason because an OS is supposed to be stable. Now, when we talk about a human being, we need to talk about what a human being does, what's the nature and function of a human being. Now, a human being lives as a social animal. That's one of the phrases that Aristotle uses. So excellence in human beings means being excellent in managing, responding to the things that human beings respond to, which is dealings with others. You cannot be a virtuous or excellent human being if you don't know how to deal with other people, if you don't know how to interact with them in a meaningful way for both for them and for you. Human function involves reason and emotion and physical appetite. Being a human being means managing all those things. And the interesting thing, of course, is not just that we manage reason separately and then we manage emotion separately and then we manage physical appetite separately. No, it doesn't work like that, because actually the big problem is sometimes reason compels us to go in one direction, whereas appetite is pushing us or pulling us in a completely different direction. And that's something that we have to balance and attain some semblance of homeostasis, if you like, or equilibrium, which all goes back to the point about balance and harmony in both eudaimonia and virtue that were discussed in the previous recordings, right? So the first question is, how do you apply virtue? Well, part of it is you cannot directly apply it. The first part is you have to acquire it first. You have to do character building, if you like. You have to acquire virtue so that you can act from it, right? So in the reading for this week, Being Virtuous and Doing the Right Thing by Juliana, she talks about the acquisition of virtue. So let's discuss that now. How do we acquire virtue? Now, after this kind of decision, I want to be a courageous person. I want to be a just person. I want to be a compassionate person. I want to be a tolerant person. I want to be open-minded. If we make decisions like that, then we have to choose to undergo some kind of developmental process. So I have here a picture of bookmakers back in the day before there were factories or big machines making books. Most of the things that we do now are at the scale of factory production. But before this, people were very in touch with the process of developing a craft. So what do you need to do when you, in the medieval period, during the time when there were medieval guilds, when you need or you want to become part of a certain profession, and that profession can be bookmaking, shoemaking, being a tailor, making clothes, being a carpenter, or being a doctor, or being a lawyer. The thing that you need to do is you have to transition from apprentice to journeyman to master. So those are the stages of development. Near the beginning, you kind of have this impulse, you kind of have this idea, I want to have this certain sort of skill, or I want to know this certain sort of craft. I want to be a bookmaker, and I don't know anything about it. Or you can say, I want to be a brave person, but I don't know much about it. How do I begin? The first step is apprenticeship. Apprenticeship in the medieval guild works like this. You pay roughly the equivalent of a tuition fee and a boarding fee so that you actually live in the shop, and usually also the house of a master craftsman, a master bookmaker, so a master craftsperson. And then in the beginning, you watch and you do the small tasks. You clean up, you get the coffee or the tea, you fetch the tools, you keep the tools clean after they're used at the end of the day, and so on and so on. So the transition from apprentice to journeyman is that the journeyman is now a wage earner. After some years of apprenticeship, the person acquires the skill to a level that they can be paid to do the job, but they're not a master yet. They're not yet at the level of a certain excellence, right? Mastery is synonymous with excellence. So in medieval guilds, it works like you need to show that you have mastered, or you know very well how to do the standard techniques and how to build the standard things. Like if you're a carpenter, you can build a chair, you can build a table, and any other pieces of furniture that's required. You know the standard techniques, you know how to use the standard tools. But above that, usually it is required that you show some element of originality in moving forward or practicing the craft. So the rough equivalent of a board exam for the guilds is for an aspiring master to present a good piece of work that the other masters in the guild can judge as a masterpiece. So if it's judged as a masterpiece, you're now considered a master, and you now may put up your own shop and even take on certain apprentices. Now, the idea is we have something equivalent in the moral life. This is how we become good. We become virtuous, we become courageous, we become generous by going through this process, which is analogous, but not exactly identical with the transition from apprentice to journeyman to master. So the developmental process for virtue features complex processes that involves thought and reflection, which informs trial and error. So in the paper written by Julianas, she talks about rejecting the technical manual model. So she says, our moral lives cannot be run by looking at the set of rules and mechanically applying them without regard to who came up with those rules, how other people say or dictate that those rules should be applied, and so on. Right? She compares that way of proceeding with doing whatever your mother tells you. Can be whatever your parent tells you, or it can be whatever your ethical theory cranks out as a final answer. Anna says there's something wrong with that. We have to go carefully through this developmental process so that whatever moral principles we apply are owned by us. It's part of who we are. We have decided and judged that it's worth keeping and abiding by. And then we live it out in very specific ways. And we have to do that in an excellent way. Right? So the developmental process model is a replacement for the technical manual, where and there is a deliberate reference to utilitarianism here, where it seems to be a matter of calculation and even the application of a very neat and clearly defined principle, like the greatest happiness principle. So how do we apply virtue? The quick answer is, near the beginning, we cannot directly apply it, or we can only apply it in partial ways, because the way to act and think and respond from virtue is via a long-drawn process of cultivation. So how does the developmental process go? We're not talking about becoming a carpenter or a tailor or even a writer, right? So the first is to identify role models. So this is the equivalent of a master or somebody you apprentice with. What I find very interesting is that before the last 3 decades, usually role models are older people. Actually, role models are usually very old people. So we have people at the end of their lives or who have recently died and they are well admired. And maybe we can even cite some of them, the likes of Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa, Teresa of Calcutta. Uh, People like that give you an image of a role model. I think what's very interesting in the last few decades is that we now have very young people who count as role models. And I have here a picture of Greta Thunberg, a Swedish activist, climate activist, and Malala Yousafzai, originally from Pakistan, who advocates for the right of women and girls to education. So if we have causes that are important to us, if we have ethical decisions that we want to build into our character, we look at the kind of person who has lived out commitment to that. And we make them our role models in the beginning. We emulate people who are better than us. The role model is not supposed to be perfect. The role model actually should be someone whom we're not infatuated by, because we should be very clear-headed about their flaws and weaknesses. So the role model, if you like, is a kind of person that allows us to benchmark where we are at a lower rung, right? They're better than us. And the way to improve ourselves is to try to imitate them. The goal is not to be a clone of them or to ape them, to ape their actions, to try to do their actions thoughtlessly. But the moral beliefs that we have taken over from others are just the beginning. It's up to us to put in the work needed to develop into someone with greater understanding for our specific context. So if you are a climate activist, for instance, so if you are committed to justice, specifically climate justice in the Asia Pacific region, specifically in the Philippines, and your role model is Greta Thunberg, and you have a very specific community or specific communities in mind, Thunberg might be a model for you in that you look at what she says, you look at what she does, you look at how she organizes, you look at how she relates with other activists and especially Thunberg is very famous for this, how she engages and criticizes persons in authority. And then you try to live that out, but you will discover that it's not possible to exactly imitate what she's doing because her context is different. So you have to find your own way. So finding a role model is only a beginning, it's only the beginning. And no matter how excellent our role models are, they cannot give us answers to all our queries because we live in very different contexts and we have to figure out our own lives. And that makes the journey of virtue richer. There might be better and worse answers and objectively correct answers, multiple objectively correct answers in the manner of particularist objectivity discussed by Nussbaum. But this is something we have to figure out ourselves. And according to Julia Annas and other virtue theorists, this is the way it should be. This is how the moral life works. It cannot work as a technical manual where we have apps or decisions dictated to us by disembodied theory or even a person in authority like a parent, right? So that's the idea in this developmental process model that Annas discusses in her paper. Now, before I go to the other parts of her ideas, I want to make a brief detour to this growth mindset idea. Near the beginning of the semester, I sent you a video featuring Carol Dweck, who did a lot of research on this idea. The idea is something called the growth mindset. So it's important that we believe we are capable of improvement. That's the premise of the developmental process model. It's based on this powerful idea that we can be better, that we may have problems now, but we can find ways to address that. So when we have traits like when we have traits like or impulses like friendliness or talkativeness or willingness to reach out to people, and we may put this under the broad heading of social intelligence, we may begin from being clumsy about that. And we can say, well, I'm just like this. I'm socially awkward. Or I'm just like this. I'm not very friendly because I don't know how to reach out. We can talk about those things in a very unproductive way, similar to the unproductive way people sometimes think about IQ or intelligence. They think about it as something fixed and that cannot change. And we sometimes talk and think like our personal qualities are fixed. Like, I'm just like this. I'm socially awkward. That's just it. I can't be friendly. I can't reach out to people. I can't like work towards a consensus, right? But that kind of thinking becomes a bad kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you cannot improve because you don't believe that you can. Improvement. So the idea is that improvement or development is only possible if you believe that you can get to the destination where you're a better person than what you are now, right? So what if we change the fixed mindset? If we change the fixed mindset, we engage exactly in the kind of developmental process that Anna discusses in her paper. What is the goal? When we engage in this developmental process, when we try to acquire individual virtues, and also have them work together, right? Sometimes people talk like virtues are opposed, like justice is different from compassion, or because compassion seems to be soft and possibly unjust. This is a misguided idea. According to Aristotelians, they think the virtues fit together. In the first place, they think that the virtues have to fit together and work synchronously or in synchronization, because our goal is eudaimonia. Our goal is flourishing at the level of individuals and the community. If the virtues go in different direction, then we cannot have that. We cannot have individual flourishing. So when we engage in this developmental process model and we try to acquire virtue, what are we trying to get at? The answer is we're trying to acquire practical wisdom. In Greek, the term is phronesis. So what is that? Right? The virtuous person is intelligent in practical matters. So practical intelligence. Now, this includes, sometimes we think of intelligence in a purely cognitive way. It's about information, having access to information. It's about reasoning capacity. So you're good at a certain kind of logic, or applying logic, the principles of logic or computations in mathematics or processing information, right? That's not exactly what we mean by practical wisdom. The virtuous person is intelligent in practical matters, and this includes matters of feeling and ways of relating with others. So practical wisdom includes emotional intelligence and social intelligence. So when I say those two phrases, they're kind of meaningful to us in an intuitive way. Emotional intelligence signals or implies a kind of maturity so that we are not completely at the mercy of emotions, so that we are not like completely pulled and pushed depending on where we're afraid or we're ecstatic, or we're nervous, we are kind of able to step back, at least to some degree, and say, I'm experiencing fear right now, but that's because I have to make an important presentation or give a crucial speech. And it's okay that I'm experiencing fear, and I can watch and feel that fear, allow it to happen, but still not be completely determined by it, so that it gets in the way of the something important that I have chosen to act on, namely giving an important presentation or giving a critical speech in support of a cause, right? Social intelligence is kind of the way we deal with other people. How can we navigate the way in which we try to trust people but don't become gullible? We try to be open to their ideas but not believe everything they say, right? And that's an important part of social intelligence. So the practical wisdom in virtue involves that, both social intelligence and emotional intelligence. This is because our duties are complex. The thing that we should do are complex. They include the responsibility to attend to the contextual features of situations that we face. We cannot just mechanically apply a principle to different cases. We have to be sensitive to the specific features of the situations that we face. And we have to be careful about the timing and manner of helping, for instance. When we have people who are needy and they're in danger of starving, the timing and manner of helping them will have an effect, not just on whether they are going to be fed today and tomorrow, but on whether they are going to, on whether it's going to be likely that they will grow dependency, that they will continue expecting handouts. So the timing and manner of the way that we help, the timing and manner of the way that we tell people the truth spells the difference between being honest and being tactless, right? So virtue has the sensitivity to the contextual features of situations that we find ourselves in, so that our actions have a substantial degree of sensitivity. So practical wisdom involves integration of reason, of desire, reason, and feeling. So we end up behaving in accordance with our considered moral judgment. So it's integrative, and it involves balancing and alignment, right? So I desire to be a certain sort of person. I desire to be just. I want to be fair-minded. I want to be attentive to problems related to scarcity of opportunities and resources. How do I go about doing that? Well, I can read about books on justice. I can read about philosophical theories on justice, of which there are many. But beyond that, I have to make sense of this desire for justice, or to be a just person that I have. What specific domains am I going to focus on? Also, what specific domains am I called to focus on? The situation that I find myself in, my context, my society, my community, my capacities. What are the things that I can do, right? And then I have to also manage the feelings associated with justice. Anger is an emotion that indicates injustice, which is why a lot of people who work on social justice causes have this challenge of managing and harnessing the power of anger or even rage at injustice. How do I manage that, so that I say, yes, the anger is justified, there's reason for it, but also it's not going to be turned destructive for me and for the causes that I am promoting. So this alignment and management of desire, reason, and feeling are all directed towards behavior. Virtue cannot be impotent in the sense that it does not translate into action. Virtue has to walk the talk, right? That's what all this effort at balancing and harmonizing and attaining an equilibrium is all about. That's what it's for, right? Okay. So in this recording, I hope you have now an initial picture of how virtue cultivation works and how it can be and how it is applied to cases. But about the latter, about applying to cases, I'll talk more about that in the next recording.